Hello, everyone. My name is Amber Deckard, and I am a second-year MPH student at the University of North Texas Health Science Center at Fort Worth. Today, we are going to be exploring the intersection between public health and education. I am excited and honored to speak with Katy Heesch today. Katy is the Community Relations Manager at the university I attend, and additionally serves as the Director of Fort Worth's Healthy City Initiative called FitWorth. Katy has been with the university for over a year now, and in this short amount of time has been involved in numerous projects, including COVID response food distributions, managing over 150 contact tracers for the county, implementing a health education program in Fort Worth schools, and more. Prior to joining the university, Katy attended Central Washington University, where she studied school health and physical education for both her undergrad and graduate degrees, after which she taught elementary physical education. Her education background and life experiences have led her to her current public health work, and I'm excited for you all to hear a little bit more about her and what she does. Thank you so much for joining us today, Katy.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, so I briefly touched on your extensive background, but can you tell me a little bit more about who you are and how you got to what you do at the university right now?
I would love to. I'll talk about myself all day. So I, like you said, came from Washington State. That's where I attended school. That's where I taught. After my year of teaching elementary PE, I decided it was not the career path for me. Moved on down to Texas, and I wanted to find something different. I wanted to stay in the health world because that's my entire background and that's my passion. But I did not want to be in K through 12 public education any longer. So I was hired on as the university's community education specialist back in February of 2020. So ultimately what my job was going to be was going to health fairs and community fairs and doing a lot of outreach and education on health, with people, but not kids, adults. So it started that way. I did one expo, if you want to call it that, where we provided health information. And then, as everybody here knows, the world stopped. So actually today, March 18th, a year ago today, we were kicked off campus here in Texas. So my job changed drastically at that point. I went into kind of a COVID response, which I know we'll touch on later. And then I became the community relations manager in June of 2020. So basically now what I do, I'm a middleman of sorts between the university and outside sources who want to work with the university and vice versa. So I just, I'm like those people that grab two hands and make them shake. So I wear 50 different hats. A lot of it has to do with public health initiatives right now. And beside my university job, I also am the director for Fort Worth's Healthy City Initiative, FitWorth, out of the mayor's office. I've recently gained this position. I'm excited about it. We work a lot with the youth, which is funny because I tried to get away from them, but I can't. I love them. So now we're doing that with the Healthy City Initiative, FitWorth.
Yes, and I know I've gotten to work with you on multiple projects, especially everything with FitWorth. So I think everything you're doing is fantastic, and it is nice being the middleman sometimes to bridge the two gaps.
It is, you're right.
Yeah, so I know you said you try to get away from kids, but we're going to go back to your education background for a second. But can you tell me a little bit more about your education background and how that led to you working with the Health Science Center? How did you go from a physical education teacher to your current role?
Yeah, no, great question, because it sounds awful when I say it. I love kids, don't get me wrong. I obviously went into education because I had that intent. So ultimately, I was in college. I knew I wanted to help people and I knew I had an interest in health. I just didn't know what that looked like. So I decided, I like sports. I like being active. I like being healthy. Why not bridge those two? Let's teach kids, help people understand how to be healthy, how to play sports, all of those things, those life skills that are so important and impacted my life greatly. So I got my undergrad degree, immediately went into my master's program 3 days after graduation.
Oh, fun.
Continued on, I don't know why I did that to myself, continued on, got my master's degree. And while I was finishing my master's degree is when I started teaching elementary PE. It was a great experience. It was an impactful experience. I have
Mhm.
no regrets. I think it shaped me to the person who I am today. And it
Mhm.
obviously led me to my position that I have now. I just think it was an eye-opening experience that
Yes.
working with kindergartners through fifth graders was not my wheelhouse, and that's fine.
Yeah.
So like I said, when I moved to Texas, I wanted to do something that still revolved around health, revolved around helping people, and community education, which again, my initial job was that,
Mhm.
seemed like the perfect fit for me because I love talking to people. I love educating. So that's what it started as, but what it's morphed into, and again, I know we'll talk about that more, is
Mhm.
what I do now. I love, I have no regrets. I'm really, really excited about where I am.
Well, I'm happy for you. That's fantastic. Everyone has a calling, so I'm glad you have found yours.
Yes,
So
me too.
I know it takes a while, but anywho, I love how you talked about that you've always had this passion for like helping kids and you've always been kind of focused around like health,
Mhm.
empowering kids and teaching those life skills. But when did you realize that that's in the realm of public health? When did you realize that?
Well, honestly, my blunt answer is circumstance, and I
Mhm.
hate to be topical and talk about COVID-19, but it's kind of consumed our lives for the last year and
That is
some.
true.
So when COVID happened a year ago today, we were kicked off campus. We weren't allowed to do events anymore. We weren't allowed to go out into the community. My job as the community education specialist halted. Like I had no work to do anymore. So I was like, okay, well, what else do I do? And the HSC really wanted to be a response center and a resource for our community and our neighbors in response to COVID-19. So I was the one who had those connections, who had like the job description that kind of fit that resource. So I was kind of thrown in and was happy to be thrown into this
Mhm.
position. So that's really how I got involved with public health. And from there, it has just grown. And I basically feel like a public health worker now, even though that's not my title. I do a lot of it. So
I would agree. I feel like everything that you do is within various realms of public health, and COVID just kind of like exploded you into this realm.
it really did. And again, no regrets. I think it's been a great opportunity. I have a lot of respect for people who choose public health as their career path from the get-go because you have no idea what you're getting into, but you're excited about it and it changes every day. And I love it.
Oh, well, I'm happy. I'm excited to like be getting into the field here in a few months when I graduate.
I'm excited for you. I can't wait to see where you go.
Okay, so I want to take a step back and kind of look at Fitworth specifically for a minute. So, with your role in education and with Fitworth, how do you think education relates to public health? How do those two go together?
Well, I think education on health topics directly impacts the public health initiatives and things like that as time goes on. So, you know, health education should start, and I'll say should because it doesn't always, should start
Yes.
at a very young age, teaching those best practices and those healthy behaviors to kids when they're in that sponge phase. So,
Mhm.
that kindergarten to let's say fifth, sixth grade, where they're like morphing into their own person, they're creating their own habits, building that foundation and teaching those healthy habits and behaviors from the get go. They'll keep those best practices as they get older,
Oh,
which
for
then
sure.
directly impacts them as adults in their communities, which
Mhm.
in turn impacts the public health. So, those, like I'm saying, those kids grow up to be the adults, the employees, perhaps the public health workers in the future in their community. So it has to start with that education piece on the do's and don'ts and making sure that it's the right information that they're getting. And like I keep saying, those healthy behaviors and habits have to start young for them to make a difference.
Mhm. I agree. I think education goes hand in hand, and the earlier we can start, kind of like you're showing with Fitworth, the better.
Yes, absolutely.
So, what kind of things would you recommend, or what can students do in the field with a background in education that helps tackle public health issues? Like, what would you tell your physical education teacher self a few years ago?
Well, I would say anything. Truthfully, like
Yeah.
you could do
Hmm.
anything with a degree just because it's education or just because it's public health or just because it's math. Like you're not stuck in that bubble at all, especially in today's age, 2021. Like as long as you have a degree, you're a go-getter, you have the skills to do a job. I don't think that there's anything you can't do, but to your question though, if you have a background in education, some of those jobs would be like public health project or program managing, which is kind of what I'm doing right now, or that public health educator job that I was talking about. Something around emergency management or emergency response, because you have those skills as an educator to, you know, create lesson plans and come up with a plan. And then when it doesn't work, how do you respond to it? So things like that. And then there's jobs like healthcare admin, health and safety engineers. There's really, the list goes on, but I would say those first four would be like the most relevant or transferable.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of options, which is very promising for people that are still like unsure what their wheelhouse is or where they want to be. So that's good.
For sure. And I'm going to apologize. There's somebody doing lawn care outside. So sorry.
It's okay. It's just, you know, the COVID times working from home. I understand.
Goodness me. Sorry.
No, you're fine. So I've loved everything that you've said, and I completely agree. So kind of bigger picture here. What do you think are issues that public health and education will tackle in the next 10 years working together?
Well, the key, I think, is working together for sure. And my topical answer would be vaccinations. You know, any vaccines, not just COVID-19, but because it's such a top of mind conversation or topic right now. And like I've said, I think there's a lot of misinformation, a lot of misunderstandings, a lot of myths. So I just think teaching it from a young age, but then also reteaching those folks in our communities who maybe just misunderstand what it is or where it comes from or how it works. So I definitely think vaccinations are going to be a huge thing that we're going to have to partner on going forward. And then the old standbys, you know, physical activity, nutrition, obesity, things like that, and how, again, topically, how they relate to underlying conditions and how that can affect you later in life. Because I think that, especially in 2020 and 2021, that's something that a lot of people were kind of awakened to, I guess I'll say, about how their choices thus far made it that they were more at risk for these new viruses and things that are coming up. So it was a huge topic of conversation that, again, I just don't think there was right information out there, or enough information for that matter. So if the two can partner together and tackle all three of those, I think that we'll be in a good place. And those are probably the most important topics.
No, I completely agree. I feel like often the role education plays in public health is like starting that conversation, like debunking those myths, like you mentioned, for everything from COVID to vaccines.
Right. Even like physical education, though, you think that people should know it, it should be common sense, but it's really not, you know? There's all the different sources of information that are out there for how long you should work out and the type of exercise you should be doing. And, you know, all of that stuff that you think should be common knowledge, unfortunately isn't. So if we can educate people, I just think that the two would make a huge impact on our public health.
Yes, and starting younger, like you mentioned, would be fantastic.
Teach them young. That's sponge stage, I'm telling you. They'll absorb all that good information.
Yes, for sure. So for students like me, just like MPH students or people considering going into an MPH program, or really any college program, like you said, all degrees kind of connect, what are some qualities of students, or like what are some recommendations for traits or things to do for students who might be interested in this work?
Well, I think the first and foremost one to me would be somebody who's proactive, but also reactive. Because like I'm saying, like coming from an education background, I could plan the perfect lesson, but the second those kids walk in the classroom, things have gone out the window, the plan's gone, so now I have to react. It's the same thing with public health. You know, when we went into, and I hate to be so topical and talk about COVID-19, but like consumes my brain.
It's the times, you know.
It is, right. So, you know, they had this plan on, let's use vaccinations, for instance, how we were going to get vaccines to the folks who needed it. And when that initial plan didn't work, they had to react, they had to pivot, they had to change their plan. So somebody who's proactive and reactive both, and on their toes. I also think, you know, being helpful is a huge portion of really any job that works with the public or, you know, kids or anything. Somebody who's truly in it to help someone, because at the end of the day, unfortunately, public health, education, all sorts of jobs are a thankless job. So you have to be in it for the right reasons.
Mhm.
And then I guess the last one that I would say that pivots off of that is being selfless. You spend a lot of your days doing work for others. And again, you're never going to get a thank you, but you're doing it for the common good and for, your next door neighbor, the kids down the street at the school. So you're just being helpful and worrying about other people before yourself.
Mhm. No, I completely agree. And it's also great whenever you get to see all that selfless work come to fruition and see that program be implemented. Or I worked with you on some health fairs and see everyone enjoy the game that you spent weeks planning, or the lesson plan you spent years planning, it feels like.
Definitely. Yeah.
Mhm.
There's moments of gratification. Don't get me wrong, but nobody for the most part is going to walk up and say, thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, and I also love how you brought up the being reactive and proactive, because I feel like your role with the university, like just your bio and you introducing yourself, it showed how to be. You have to be both of those things.
Absolutely. And I think the funniest thing, and I'm sure any public health job is the same way, when somebody's like, oh, what do you do? I love that question, but I hate that question because I'm like, gosh, where do I start? I don't know.
Mhm.
Today I'm working on contact tracing. Sorry, it's so loud. Today I'm working on, I'm going out and educating kindergartners about fruits and veggies. Like, it just changes so frequently.
Yes, but got to adapt to the times and tackle whatever issues the pressing one that day. So,
Definitely.
well, you're doing a great job at it, I think. So,
Oh, thank you.
there's your gratification for the
Yeah,
day.
I'll take it. That fills me up for the whole year. I'm good.
Okay, all right, perfect. I'm glad I could do that for you. So, just one more question. Are there any resources or anything that you would recommend people look into if they're interested in this type of work, either education, public health, like how they tie together, things like that?
The CDC is a great resource always, if you want to
Yes.
specifically look at public health jobs or anything surrounding public health. They're a great resource. It's up to date, trustworthy, all of that good stuff. And then I would say your local health department or your local school district, whatever you're trying to get into,
Mm-hmm.
ask about internships, ask about shadowing opportunities, or even paid work. If that's somewhere you want to start to get a foot in the door,
Mm-hmm.
get an office job, something just to get you in. You can be in that world, see if you like it, like how I taught for a year. I got in there as a new teacher. I did it for my contracted year, and then I decided, you know what, not my thing. But I put myself in that position, and then was able to make that educated decision on where I was going to go.
Mm-hmm. And there's also a ton of opportunities, like to get in the door volunteering wise, because I know your office sends out volunteer opportunities all the time. And I know that's how I got involved with a lot of the work you do.
Yes, volunteerism. I mean, not just for your resume, but for you as an individual, and not specifically you. I'm just talking to the royal you.
Yes.
It allows you to be involved in a variety of activities surrounding, like, let's say public health, for instance. You could be registering people for vaccines one day.
Mm-hmm.
You could be doing food distribution one day. You're going to see so many different things surrounding that one job. And it's, again, it fills your cup. You get to help others, which is great. And you don't have to worry about contracts, any of that. So it's just a great thing to have on a resume, but also just do for yourself.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree. It's where I figured out that I love working with food insecurity and I love working with children. So that's how I found it, was through volunteering. But that
I
may be
love
my
that.
wheelhouse.
That's great. And I'm glad you figured that out before you signed a contract to do a job for a year.
At least it was just a year, but you're where you're meant to be now.
Oh my goodness. It taught me a lot. I joke about it, but it taught me a lot.
I bet it did. I bet it did. Well, thank you so much. That's all the questions I have for today. I really appreciated talking to you and getting to know you a bit more. But yeah, is there anything else you'd like to share before we end this?
I would just say, go out, well, maybe not physically right now, but go meet people, whatever field you're interested in, whether it is public health or education or science or robotics. I don't know what you're interested in, but go make those connections. Interview somebody or have a coffee with somebody who works in that field. Ask those questions. Don't be afraid to insert yourself, because people will love to help you and guide you where you want to go instead of you fumbling your way through. Use the resources around you. Use those online resources that I just talked about. Do that homework. So I would say just don't be afraid, jump in. Everything that you're going to do is going to be worth it in the end, and there's no such thing as mistakes.
I agree. I agree. Well, thank you so much for your insight and everything that you have given today. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much today for everyone for joining in. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.